But then you have all of your viral promoters and you have your antibiotic markers, so that there isn't such a thing as substantial equivalence between a genetically engineered plant and a non-engineered. The term genetic or substantially equivalent was developed by the FDA to evaluate medical equipment, not a biological system where you have the dynamics of the physiology involved. It was merely looking at sensitivity of the equipment as far as, is this going to do the same job or a better job than the equipment that's already out there. When you look at substantial equivalence in the GMO and the non-GMO, you see all of those differences. They're different enough that you can even patent it. And that requires documenting and also signing an affidavit that this product is substantially different than other products that are on the market. And I've gone through that several times, that process, and it has to be different to patent it, and all of these are patented. There's some other things that we now know with the genetic engineering, and that's some of the changes in the physiology. Professor Shiva Ayyadurai and his team of 7 scientists have worked 3 years looking at those differences from a physiological standpoint. In that physiology, what they find when you put that genetic material inserted in the genetic material of the plant, disrupt the integrity of the genetic system. One thing has always stood out, and that's blockage of a physiological pathway we refer to the C1 metabolism. You're not my student, so you don't have to remember all that. We won't go into all the enzymes and glutamic acid and all of those things that are involved. But what happens when you block C1 metabolism, that's the central metabolism for a plant or an animal, by which you can add carbon elements to make bigger compounds, but it's also the way that big elements are cut down into smaller elements by eliminating 1 carbon at a time. That 1 carbon is formaldehyde. When you have a carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, you have formaldehyde produced. Oh, we don't find formaldehyde in our foods and our normal plants because it's almost an instantaneous process to eliminate it through C1 metabolism. Shiva and his team of scientists at Massachusetts Institute of Technology have reported, and they have 4 peer-reviewed scientific studies detailing all of those processes. When that process is blocked, there's no way to get rid of the formaldehyde that's a natural metabolite. Formaldehyde accumulates. Formaldehyde is a known class 1 carcinogen. We have 0 tolerance in most of our foods. And yet in genetically engineered corn and soybeans, you find formaldehyde. In corn, if you'll take a triple stack ear of corn about maturity, break it in 2 and smell the cob, and you'll smell the formaldehyde. Rats and mice and squirrels and deer won't eat it unless they're absolutely forced to. They can go around it, they'll find another source of food before they'll eat the genetically engineered corn or soybeans. Again, formaldehyde is a very toxic compound. We're finding 10 to 200 parts per million. Some of our genetically engineered corn. I'll give you a reference point on it. After the Hurricane Katrina dealt its devastation in Mississippi and New Orleans and those areas, FEMA came in and moved in trailer homes for to support the people that had lost their homes. And within 2 or 3 weeks, people started coming down with asthma and rashes and allergy responses and various diseases. And it was all traced to the formaldehyde coming out of the wood and the materials that were in those trailer homes. And so FEMA had to remove them. The highest level of formaldehyde that was found in any of those trailers was 0.097 parts per million. In corn, we can find anywhere from 10 to 200 parts per million of this very severe class 1 carcinogen. So that if you look at those, and FDA said, well, they're substantially equivalent. We've never defined that term, and you say, well, what are they? How are they substantially equivalent? Well, they have leaves and a stem and roots on them, so they must be the same soybean plant. But you look at the physiology of Dr. Ayaderi and his team, and they can show many different systems there. Oops, we're off there. Must have hit that. There we go. That up. Have to watch how I wave up here, I guess. Thank you. So there are many changes, and these are just some of the changes that we have always known were different. But the other thing, when formaldehyde goes up as a result of blockage of the C1 metabolism, you have a depletion of glutathione. That's your immune system. That's that powerful antioxidant that helps you in stress and disease. And it's depleted. And even though there are ways to increase glutathione normally, in the genetically engineered plant, they couldn't find any way to remove that or to increase the glutathione production in the genetically engineered plant. Where in the non-engineered, the plant will compensate and you have a steady state level of glutathione that's present there. So that just the process has its own inherent health and safety concerns. We need to label, even if it's just the process. And then we need to recognize what the chemicals are and their toxicity and relationship is that we're applying to those plants or that those plants are producing. Since 99% of them are going to be for Roundup Ready, and then either BT or maybe dicamba, and now even 2,4-D. In addition to that, we need to understand what those chemicals, the safety of those chemicals is. We look at glyphosate. It was first patented in 1964 to clean boilers. It was patented as a mineral chelator. Chelator is a compound that can grab onto another element, and it changes physical characteristics without becoming synthesized or without creating a new compound. It's merely grabbed on with a bonding relationship so that it changes the characteristics of that element. Now, we use chelators to increase solubility or to move materials across cell membranes and whatnot, EDTA or citric acid or malic acid or glucoheptanates. A number of those are quite beneficial. When it comes to the organic phosphate and phosphite materials, they immobilize the minerals when they chelate with them. So you have glyphosate that's a very strong chelator. Chelates with all of the positively charged elements that are essential for the plant or for the animal or for us. So that it was first patented as a strong chelator to chelate with calcium and magnesium and iron in boilers and steam pipes and to clean them. 10 years later, in 1974, it was patented as a very broad spectrum potent herbicide. Nothing lived. It was considered a fully broad spectrum herbicide because it's a broad spectrum chelator. In 2000, it was patented as a very broad spectrum antibiotic because it's a broad spectrum chelator. If you're taking a lot of medicines, they're chelators. They may have other functions besides that, but medicine is just recognizing now, and you'll see tables that will have a list of the minerals that would be recommended for you to take if you're taking this particular medicine. If you're on a high antibiotic, high tetracycline antibiotic therapy, you probably should be taking a zinc supplement because it's a very strong zinc chelator. So that glyphosate as a very strong mineral chelator, broad spectrum, fits in a category chemically all by itself because of the scope of interaction that it has. It's considered that it'll be another 100 years before a chemical comparable to it will be invented. It's that unique. So that it's an herbicide, it's a chelator, it's an antibiotic. It's a relatively simple compound. I was asked in 1974 how long it would persist in the soil because that was an area of research I'd worked on for many years. I looked at degradation, especially a lot of new chemicals and their degradation for Department of Defense, and USDA, and other agencies, looking at how long it took to degrade. What would be the persistence of it? I looked at glyphosate. You have a simple amino acid, glycine. And you have a phosphite, a PO3. Looked at it and said, well, if I had to guess, I'd probably guess 2 weeks. Because every organism in the soil is going to be able to peel off the glyphosate, off the glycine. Phosphite shouldn't be a problem. Phosphate isn't much of a problem, but phosphite turns out to be a very difficult problem. This very simple compound of one of the simplest amino acid and just a PO3 is extremely difficult and unpredictable to degrade. The carbon phosphate lyase enzyme that is required to degrade it is very rare in nature. And so its half-life under ideal conditions with an excellent biological component there may be as short as 1.5 years. In a good agricultural soil, it's more likely to be 10 to 22 years. Very persistent potential with this compound. Very difficult compound to extract and to analyze for. So that it has some very unique characteristics relative to most of our other pesticides, and it sits again as a category by itself in the world of pesticides. And we talk about ALS inhibitors or photosynthetic inhibitors or shikimate inhibitors or whatnot, referring to the physiological process that is shut down. But we should say, this is a copper chelator, this is a zinc chelator, this is a manganese chelator, or an iron chelator, or magnesium. With glyphosate,